Hi, I'm Jessica Gregory, and this is My EcoBuzz, where we talk about ways to care for the resources we share, regardless of our politics, position, or place. We just started a series on carbon that I'm really excited about. Last time, we looked at what makes carbon the building block of life and how the carbon cycle works. This time, we're going to talk about the role of carbon in regulating our climate, and we're going to take a preliminary look at what is happening with carbon around the world today.
Carbon dioxide, the carbon in our atmosphere, is one of the substances in our air that helps to trap heat from the sun and keep it close to the Earth's surface. CO2 does this by absorbing much of the infrared heat reflected from Earth's surface and directing it back toward the ground instead of letting it drift away into space.
This is a good thing, too, because without this protective blanket to cover the Earth, we would freeze.
Other substances in the air do the same thing, including water vapor, methane, and nitrous oxide, among others. Atmospheric gases with this ability are termed greenhouse gases because this process is similar to how the air inside a greenhouse heats up in comparison to the air outside.
As a result, carbon dioxide plays an important role in regulating the climate on our planet.
Remember the carbon cycle we talked about last time? Carbon is released through the exhalation or respiration of living things, while excess carbon is absorbed and stored in plants, soil, and the oceans.
The thing is, the carbon cycle is not a stable system. If carbon is added or removed, imbalances occur, and the cycle gets thrown off.
Now, natural fluctuations in CO2 levels happen seasonally all the time, and these are driven primarily by the presence of plants around the world, mainly in the northern hemisphere. CO2 levels increase slightly during the winter months because many plants stop performing photosynthesis, which absorbs CO2, so the dominant process becomes respiration, which produces CO2. Then in the spring, CO2 levels come down again as photosynthesis resumes. You can see this on graphs showing CO2 levels over time, represented by an up and down squiggly line instead of a straight line. Because of their heat-trapping properties, fluctuations in greenhouse gases like CO2 have also contributed to global temperature fluctuations over time. Such natural cycles cause changes in temperature as heat is redistributed across different regions on Earth. When heat is released from warm oceans into the atmosphere, global air temperatures rise slightly and affect wind and precipitation patterns, bringing drier air and droughts to some regions, but wetter weather to others. The reverse happens when cooler ocean waters absorb heat from the air. Adding extra CO2 to the air enhances these natural cycles by trapping more heat, which creates a positive feedback cycle that causes additional variability to Earth's climate patterns.
So, how is CO2 added into the air?
In the last episode on the carbon cycle, we talked about some of the natural sources of atmospheric CO2. But carbon is also released into the atmosphere by human activities like mining and burning fossil fuels. Because these activities release carbon in much greater quantities than what occurs naturally, they create an imbalance in the carbon cycle and trap more heat in the atmosphere, raising Earth's average temperature and resulting in greater climate variability. And that's what is occurring around the world today. To date, the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere has risen by more than 50% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and that has contributed to a global temperature increase of almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the mid-1800s. This increase is more significant than any previously documented or estimated from previous natural cycles.
Of course, CO2 is still being absorbed from the air by the oceans and by plants, but the issue we're currently facing is that these natural systems cannot remove the carbon as quickly as it's being released.
Areas that have served as carbon sinks for thousands of years or more, like fossil fuel deposits, forests, and permafrost, have instead become carbon sources, creating imbalances to the carbon cycle at a global scale. These imbalances come with a cost to our ecosystems, to our societies, to our bank accounts, and to our health and livelihoods.
You're undoubtedly familiar with the term climate change. Because of how politicized these words have become, they're understandably surrounded by a full spectrum of emotions, assumptions, and even stereotypes. Wherever you may fall on that spectrum, I hope you'll stick with me for future episodes as we look more specifically at the costs of carbon and how those costs directly affect you and I, the resources we share, and the people we love. Until then, happy naturing.